So here's our closing question, and then I'm gonna save the rest of these for our second filmmaker question stream. Holy Mackerel the Third asked if you have any tips on enthusiasm. The thing they find hardest is getting started writing or planning, and have trouble following through on projects. I know that this is something a lot of creative people face. I'd really like to hear you talk about how you deal with follow through and possibly schedule, and when you don't manage to keep up with those things, how you deal with that.
So I wish I had them still. Like, I don't keep them on my desk anymore, but I used to. I have these two little plush toys that I made. Like, they're just basically little like gingerbread men that I made out of just some scrap fabric that I had lying around, and they're awful. They're terrible. They're ugly and lopsided and hideous. But I kept them on my desk for years because they were they were part of a project that I started about a year before I started making the show, which was a motivation project. And what it was you come up with a task, a creative task, and then you have 24 hours to complete that task. And at the end of that 24 hours, whatever state it is in is done. It's considered done. And so where this came from is I had so back in high school I had these creative writing classes that I took, and what I had started to notice is that nobody was ever finishing anything. Is that everybody, when it would come like time for like group sharing, everyone would be like, all right, well, this is a novel starter, but here's the first half of the first chapter. And then they would share their thing. And I was doing this too. Like, I am not blameless. I would do this too. And so I was thinking back on these, and I was like, you know what I really need is I need to finish projects, because the one part of a project, this is an old canard, like tons of people have pointed this out, is that creative people have this habit of starting projects and then never finishing them. And what I had realized is that is skill building, is that you are learning how to start projects, and you get better and better at starting projects. But because you're never finishing projects, you're not building the skill of completing something. You're not building the skill of walking away from something. You're constantly in this state of like, okay, well, this is just a beginning. This is a start. This is the seed for something that will come later. And there are places for that, but I knew that I needed to find a place where I could build skills on the other end. Build the skills of finishing, build the skills of walking away. And so so that's the thing. You come up with a creative task and you have 24 hours to finish it. And at the end of that 24 hours, it doesn't matter what state it's in, that state is you consider that state to be done. It's not, oh, well, here's a good start of something, or if I put another 10 hours into this, it would be so much better. It's like, no, the state of this is complete, even if it's awful, even if it's bad, even if it's malformed, even if it's broken. It is done. And then you walk away from it. And what this did was, this is a great task for, like, this is a great way of getting yourself unjammed if you're having creative block. It's a great way of building skills for the entire process. You see this, like, this is the underlying logic of things like game jams and 24-hour film fests, is that it's like, learning to finish something and learning to accept that things are done, and also helping yourself move away from the emotional investment of like, okay, this thing that I'm going to make is, I am going to come out onto the scene with a bang. I am going to make something perfect and everyone will notice it. And it's like, no, you need to accept that some of the stuff that you're going to make is going to suck. Some of it is going to be things that you're not ultimately that invested in. Like, you know, you're doing it because, you know, you need money, because you're bored, because somebody asked you to, because like whatever. Like, you're going to do stuff. You will end up making things for reasons other than pure, raw, creative passion. And out of that, you know, when you can accept that, when I can accept that, when I can get myself into a place where it's like, all right, some of the things I'm going to make are going to be not great, or are going to be just kind of okay. When you accept that, then you're able to actually make things. And so there's a point where, like, you know, you just kind of need to tell yourself, like, all right, just make something. It doesn't need to be good. It just needs to be done. I would actually say that, like, my All of the Lights review, that was actually where it came from. Is that so I did the memes episode in Australia, and then I cooked up a whole bunch of other ideas, and I shot like 2 of them and then never finished them. You know, because I got hung up on tiny little things like, oh, well, the audio is pretty bad. And honestly, like, I went back and reviewed the footage and the audio is terrible, or they're like nonsense. Like, they were bad. They were bad. I wasn't necessarily wrong for trash canning them, but it was then mid 2011. In fact, it was July. It was July 2011. I was sitting there and it was like, okay, I have this whole idea. I had script ideas and I had things I wanted to talk about, and I had this puppet idea and I was starting to build the puppet, and I had the prototype of the puppet, and it was just kind of this moment where it was like, you know what? You can spend the next year or 2 years pre-producing this idea, because it's like, oh, well, I've got to get a better camera, and I've got to get a better microphone, and I've got to like really work on these scripts, and these scripts need to be so good that like people are really going to notice them once they're out there. And I realized I was getting hung up on that, and I needed to, and it was like, no, you need to make something this weekend, and at the end of the weekend it needs to be done, and you're going to put it out there and walk away. And so I did that. I used fully, and if you go back and watch All of the Lights, which you actually can't now that I've said it out loud because it's copyright claim, but I think if any of like the first 3, like, you can totally see that the puppet isn't done. Like, not just, you know, oh, I continued to make changes to the puppet. It was like clearly not complete. And, you know, I felt so anxious about that at the time, because it's like, oh, is anybody going to notice this? And in retrospect, it's like, that was not the important question, because no one was going to notice it. Not really. I mean, sort of, but
Well,
not
no
really.
one knew
Like,
what it was supposed to look like.
yeah. And so it was like, well, no, it ultimately did become part of a like building process. And, you know, I mean, I still go through this all the time. Like, people, I get a huge influx of people through one source or another, and I go, you know, and I start then getting super worried about like the thing that I put out after that. Like, oh, it needs to be like better. Otherwise, all of these people are going to realize I'm a fraud, and they're gonna run away. And it's like, that's not actually that big of a risk. Like, people are willing to hang out through a lot of things, and like keeping things proportional in terms of like what the stakes actually are. That is like, nah, the stakes are not that high. You're not talking about like, oh, well, they gave me $150 million budget. I better produce something that's actually like good, or they're never going to hire me again. It's like, you're making videos for the internet. Like, you're going to have to put out a couple before anyone like really notices you. And if you put out 10, 20, 30, 100 that are like really kind of bad before you hit your stride, no one's going to care. Like, no one's going to hold you to it. No one's going to, you know, like if you get that one that's like where you just nail it and like it gets posted everywhere and everyone shares it, no one's going to like, yeah, people are going to dive through your backlog, but no one's going to go, oh man, your old stuff's terrible, unsubscribe. You know, they're going to be, it's like, oh, well, I already subscribed for the new stuff. Like, presumably the new stuff's going to be up to the quality, or at least in the neighborhood of the quality of the newish, like of whatever they signed on for. And so, you know, just kind of go
Like, you're only ever gonna improve. So
yeah, in theory,
yeah,
like ideally you're only ever going to improve.
okay,
So
fingers crossed.
So to make that short, how to get over that hump is to make
Just make.
something, just make something, and I would actually like really recommend like pet projects will kill you. Pet projects will put you in your grave. Uh, Murder your pet projects. You know, 1 in every 10 pet project is actually worth the effort that you put into it, and the others probably deserve to either be like rushed out and abandoned, if not taken out behind the shed and shot. Like most of the ideas that we get fixated on as pet projects are not nearly as good as we think they are. I mean, most of my like I've gone back and looked at some of my like my babies. This like someday this I will carve this into a perfect finished form, and I go back and I look at my notes and I look at like everything that I was working on. I'm like, God, I can't believe I thought this was my like thing, that this was going to be the thing that was going to make me. And it's like, no, this was an awful idea. I'm probably better for having not made this. So yeah, if you find yourself becoming fixated on a project, it is actually statistically a good sign that it's a bad project and you should walk away. Like that sounds so bad, but it's like, no, kill your babies and kill your heroes.
Okay, so to sum up the final question, guys, just make shit,
Just
kill your
make it.
babies,
Yeah.
kill your heroes.
Yeah.
You heard it here from Dan. This is his advice for pushing forward.
So yeah.